The man who watched before he spoke. The Saturday morning traffic on Peachtree Dunwoody Road was already thickening by 9:15, heat shimmering off the asphalt in slow, lazy waves, the way it always did in Atlanta in late July. Marcus Calloway drove a 7-year-old Jeep Grand Cherokee with a cracked passenger side sun visor and a back seat that still had a water bottle holder full of crayons, because Amani had claimed that armrest as her permanent studio sometime around age 6 and had never relinquished it. He drove it deliberately. He owned 4 other cars, 2 of them parked in a climate-controlled garage at his home in Buckhead, one on indefinite loan to his sister in Marietta. But on mornings like this one, mornings when he needed to see something clearly, he drove the Jeep. Amani was in the back seat with her book bag, which she had insisted on bringing, even though it was a Saturday and they were not going to school, because the bag contained her sketchbook, and her sketchbook went everywhere she went. She was 9 years old and already had opinions about line weight. Marcus had no idea where she got that from. Her mother, maybe, wherever that particular inheritance lived. He did not think about that for long. "Daddy," Amani said, not looking up from the page she was filling with something that appeared to be a horse, but might have been a dog. "Why does this place have to be so far?" "It's not far," Marcus said. "It's 20 minutes. 20 minutes is far." 20 minutes is not far, Amani. She turned the sketchbook sideways, squinted at it, turned it back. "Can we get food after?" "Yes." "Real food or smoothie food?" "What's the difference?" She looked up at him in the rearview mirror with an expression of complete seriousness that she had inherited from him directly and unmistakably. "Real food has cheese." Marcus almost smiled. He did not quite get there, but it was close. "Real food," he said. After. The Callaway Prestige Auto Group had 4 locations across Metro Atlanta. The Dunwoody location was the largest, 12,000 square feet of climate-controlled showroom, 31 employees, and the highest per-unit revenue of any of the 4 branches. It had also generated, over the last fiscal quarter, a pattern of customer feedback that had lodged itself in Marcus's chest like a splinter he could not locate by feel alone. 14 reviews across 2 platforms. Not all negative the service department rated consistently well, but 6 of the 14 mentioned feeling unwelcome, feeling assessed before being spoken to, feeling in the careful, diplomatic language that people used when they were describing something they couldn't quite prove, like they hadn't been treated the way someone else in the room had been treated. Marcus had read each one twice. He had not forwarded them to his regional operations manager, or to the branch's general manager, or to anyone on his executive team. He had folded them into a place in his mind where he kept things that needed to be seen directly, rather than filtered through a report. And he had waited for a Saturday when Amani had no soccer practice and he had no calls scheduled before noon. He pulled into the dealership lot at 9:32 and parked the Jeep near the far end of the visitor spaces, away from the row of trade-ins gleaming under the morning sun. He was wearing a gray cotton t-shirt, dark jeans, and a pair of New Balance sneakers that had seen perhaps 3 years of regular use. His watch was the one his father had left him, a modest, scuffed Seiko that he had never replaced because replacing it had never once felt like the right decision. Around his neck was nothing. On his wrist besides the Seiko was nothing. In his back pocket was a wallet, a phone, and the small metal keychain that Amani had given him for his birthday the previous October. A little circular tag with the Callaway Group logo stamped into it, the stylized letter C inside a geometric frame, which she had found in the supply closet at his main office during a Bring Your Daughter to Work day, and had decided was the perfect gift because, as she had explained with complete confidence, "It already has your name on it, Daddy." He had kept it on his keys ever since. It was the kind of thing you didn't explain to people. You just did it. Imani climbed out of the Jeep with her bag and immediately looked up at the building's glass facade, which reflected the morning sky in a long silver sheet. "It's shiny," she observed. "Most of it is," Marcus said. "Do you actually like cars?" He considered this. "I like what they mean to people." She thought about that for a moment, then accepted it the way she accepted most of his answers, not quite satisfied, but willing to table it for later. She reached up and took his hand, and they walked toward the entrance together, the automatic doors sliding open with a breath of refrigerated air that smelled like new upholstery and something faintly floral. A diffuser scent chosen by someone in facilities management, whose name Marcus knew, but whose choice he had never weighed in on. The showroom floor was arranged exactly as the design plans had specified when they had renovated the space 4 years ago. Flagship models on a raised central platform, mid-tier vehicles arranged in a semicircle around them, the service consultation desk set back toward the left, the sales floor with its cluster of glass-walled offices on the right, a curved reception desk anchored the entrance, with a beverage station behind it. Everything was where it was supposed to be. The lighting fell at the angles that the consultant had specified. The cars gleamed. There were 3 customers already inside. 2 men in polo shirts examining the hood of a steel gray sedan on the platform, and a woman waiting near the service desk with a key fob in her hand. 2 salespeople were visible. A man in his mid-40s, with the particular quality of stillness that experienced sales staff developed. A stillness that was not relaxation, but readiness, positioned near the raised platform, and a younger woman at the reception desk, who looked up when Marcus and Imani walked in, and gave them a small, genuine smile before turning back to her computer screen. The man near the platform did not look up. Marcus noted this without expression. He guided Imani toward the beverage station, where she immediately began investigating the selection of small water bottles with the focus of someone who had strong preferences about water temperature, and he stood for a moment with his hand resting lightly on the counter, looking at the room. There was a board on the wall near the left corridor, a staff recognition display, the kind that most of the branches had, with photographs and names and titles arranged in a grid. Marcus had not approved the specific layout of this one. He looked at it now. General Manager Gail Morris, a woman he had promoted 18 months ago from the Alpharetta location, based on her operations record. Sales Manager Derek Sloan, who had been with this branch for 6 years, hired before Marcus had formalized the group's central HR processes, inheriting him from the previous operator when Marcus had acquired the location. Marcus's gaze moved to Derek's photograph, professionally taken, dark jacket, confident expression, and stayed there for a moment longer than it moved over the others. The 3 customer feedback reviews that had mentioned feeling redirected to lower-priced options without being asked about budget had all been submitted by customers who had come in on Saturdays. Derek Sloan's primary sales shift was Saturday through Wednesday. Marcus did not think about the word coincidence. He did not use it often. "Daddy," Imani said, appearing at his elbow with a water bottle held in both hands. "Can I sit down?" He looked around for the customer seating area, a set of low chairs arranged near a coffee table with automotive magazines fanned across it, and pointed her toward it. "Right there," he said. "Leave your bag with me." She handed over the bag, which he slung over one shoulder, and trotted off to the seating area. He set the bag down on the reception counter to free his hands, and the small metal keychain on his keyring clinked against the counter surface as the bag settled. The young woman at the reception desk, her name tag read Yara, and she had the careful posture of someone still figuring out what to do with their hands at a professional desk, glanced up at the sound, then back at her screen. Marcus left the bag on the counter and walked toward the raised display platform, where he stood and looked at the vehicle centered on it. A midnight blue 4-door that he recognized as the top trim of the group's best-selling flagship line. He had looked at this exact unit number in the inventory report. He knew its margin. He knew how long it had been on the floor. He had absolutely no intention of buying it. What he intended was to ask about it. He stood there and waited. The salesman near the platform, Derek Sloan, whom Marcus now recognized from the photograph at closer range, was still positioned a few feet away, his attention directed toward the two men in polo shirts, though the men were not currently engaged in conversation with him. He had the look of someone orbiting a gravitational center of their own choosing. Marcus waited 30 seconds, then 45. Then he reached into the display information stand at the base of the platform and picked up the vehicle's spec sheet, and he stood there reading it. $58,400 base. He knew this. From the corner of his eye, he saw the entrance doors slide open again. A couple walked in, a man and a woman, both in their late 30s, the man in a pressed linen shirt, the woman with a large designer handbag. They paused just inside the doors, looking around with the pleasant uncertainty of people who expected to be helped. In under 10 seconds, Derek Sloan moved. "Good morning," Derek said, crossing to them with the forward momentum of someone answering a starting pistol. "Welcome in. Can I get you started with something specific today, or would you like to browse the floor first?" Marcus put the spec sheet back in the stand. He looked at the midnight blue car for another moment. Then he turned and walked back toward where Amani was sitting, because his daughter had opened her sketchbook, and because he needed to think, and because a thing observed once was a data point, and a thing observed twice was a pattern, and he was not finished watching yet. "Is that a horse?" he asked, sitting down next to her. "It's a Jaguar," she said without looking up. "Like the car," she paused. "There are cars called Jaguars." "There are." She looked up at the platform. "Is that one?" "No," he said. "That one's ours." She looked at him with a small, puzzled frown, the way she always did when he said something that almost made sense. He did not explain further. He leaned back in the chair, rested his ankle on his knee, and watched the room. The invisible customers. Derek Sloan had been in automotive sales for 19 years. And he believed, sincerely, without particular malice, in the way that people believe things that have never been seriously challenged, that he could read a customer from across a showroom floor in under 30 seconds. He had not invented this belief. It had been handed to him by a man named Carl Wexford, who had managed the Dunwoody location before Marcus's group acquired it, and who had referred to the ability as reading the room, which was a phrase that made it sound both analytical and intuitive at once, the way professional instincts often sounded when dressed in casual language. Carl Wexford had been, by the numbers, an effective sales manager. His close rate on floor traffic had been above regional average for 7 of his 9 years at the location. He had also in those 9 years generated 0 formal complaints filed through the company's customer relations system. Not because no one had been treated poorly, but because the company's customer relation system, under the previous operator, had not been a thing that existed in any organized way. Marcus had not learned this until 14 months after the acquisition, when he had finally finished auditing the pre-existing operational structure and found the gap where a feedback loop should have been. By that point, Carl Wexford had retired to Savannah, and Derek Sloan had absorbed the methodology so completely that he would not have been able to tell you, if asked, where his own professional instincts ended and Carl Wexford's teaching began. It was like asking someone to identify the precise moment they had begun to hold a pen a certain way. Derek's 30-second read on Marcus and Amani, executed the moment they had walked through the automatic doors, had proceeded as follows. Male, late 30s, plain clothing without visible brand markers. Older vehicle visible through the glass front. Child in tow, no visible companion. Category browser. Not a buyer today. Possibly not a buyer at this price point at all. Action. Hold position. Allow junior staff to manage initial greeting. Redirect engagement to higher probability prospects. He was not proud of this process. He was simply not conscious of it as a process. It was to him experience. The couple who had entered 4 minutes after Marcus Brad and Catherine Hollister, as Derek would later know them, though he introduced himself before asking their names, because that was the technique that built rapport, had registered differently in the same 30 seconds. Linen shirt, confidence of movement, designer bag. Eye contact made immediately with Derek, rather than with the cars. Category buyer, today or soon? Upper trim likely. Action, engage immediately. He was not wrong about the Hollisters. They were, in fact, there to buy. They had come in 2 weeks prior, spoken to a different salesperson, and had come back because Catherine had decided she wanted the midnight blue, and Brad had decided he wanted to make Catherine happy, which was an excellent combination from a sales perspective. Derek would have them in a financing office within 90 minutes. He was not right about Marcus. He would not find this out for several hours. In the interim, Marcus sat with Amani in the customer seating area and observed. He was doing what he had trained himself to do in rooms where he needed information and had no authority to demand it yet, which was, in practice, the same thing as having all the authority in the world and choosing not to use it. He watched Derek walk the Hollisters toward the raised platform. Watch him gesture toward the midnight blue vehicle with the practiced ease of someone presenting a painting. He watched Brad Hollister run a hand along the car's hood, and Derek lean in with a smile that was warm and genuine in the way that a good salesperson's warmth was always somewhat genuine enthusiasm for the transaction, producing real feeling, not simulated. He watched Amani draw. After 9 minutes, he noted the time, not deliberately, but because he had a habit of noting times, the way some people noted weather, as ambient data. He stood up, crossed the showroom floor, and approached a second salesperson who had appeared from the direction of the offices. A young man in his mid-20s, named, according to his badge, Terrell. Terrell had the look of someone who had been in the role for less than a year, and was still slightly afraid of his own voice in professional settings, which Marcus recognized because he had interviewed at least 200 people who looked that way, and had learned to distinguish between the ones who were afraid because they were out of their depth, and the ones who were afraid because they cared enough to be nervous. Terrell looked like the second kind. "Good morning," Marcus said. Terrell straightened almost imperceptibly. "Good morning, sir. Can I help you with something?" Marcus gestured toward the platform. "I wanted to ask about the blue one, the flagship. Is there someone I can talk to about it?" Something moved across Terrell's face, a microsecond of something Marcus could not fully read, whether hesitation or uncertainty, or the particular social discomfort of a junior employee being asked to do something his internal hierarchy had not cleared. "I can help you with some general information," Terrell said carefully. "For a full walkthrough and pricing, I'd typically defer to one of our senior team. But I can tell you that model starts at 58.4, and depending on trim and packages, you're looking at up to about 67, 68,000. Marcus nodded. "What's the current inventory on that color?" "I believe we have 2 on the lot in that exterior, 1 on the floor and 1 out back." "Good. I'd like to see both at some point." He paused. "What financing options do you run?" Terrell began to answer, then caught himself, not rudely, but with the particular deference of someone about to go outside his lane. "Our senior sales team usually handles financing conversations. Let me see if I can." "Terrell." The voice came from the direction of the sales offices, and Marcus turned to see Derek Sloan approaching. His smile recalibrated from the Hollister warmth to something more guarded, the smile of someone who had interrupted a situation they had not authorized. "Mr. Sloan," Terrell said, stepping back slightly. Derek turned his attention to Marcus with an expression of professional attentiveness that had a ceiling in it, a kind of service that was comprehensive up to a point and then became economy class. "Good morning. I'm Derek Sloan, sales manager. Were you looking at the AX7? "I was asking about it," Marcus said. "I'd like more information." Derek's eyes moved over Marcus in the way that was not quite a look, because it was too brief and too practiced to be called deliberate a glance, really. The kind that people performed in microseconds and genuinely did not believe was a judgment, because it did not feel like one from the inside. "Of course," he said. "Are you familiar with that model's segment? It's our top-tier flagship, so the price point tends to be... It's a significant purchase. We also have some excellent options in the 45 to 50 range that offer a lot of the same technology package if that's a better fit." Marcus looked at him for a moment, not with anger, with the particular quality of attention that very patient people gave to things they intended to remember precisely. "I'm familiar with the model," he said. "I'd like to talk about the flagship." Derek's expression did not change, which was itself a kind of response. "Absolutely," he said. "Let me just finish up with another customer, and I'll circle back to you. In the meantime, Terrell can answer some initial questions." He touched Terrell on the shoulder in the collegial way that communicated hierarchy more clearly than any title, and turned back toward the Hollisters. Marcus returned to the seating area. Imani looked up. "Did you find out about the car?" "Getting there," Marcus said. "That man seemed like he didn't want to talk to you." Marcus looked at his daughter. She had her sketchbook open to a new page and had drawn in the top corner a small square that might have been a car or might have been a television. "What made you think that?" he said. She shrugged with the enormous casualness of someone who hadn't yet learned to doubt her own perceptions. "He talked to that other family right away. We were here first." Marcus said nothing for a moment. Then, "You notice things." "You always say that like it's surprising," Imani said. "I'm 9, not a baby." He wanted to tell her something true and useful, something that would hold. He wanted to say that what she'd noticed was correct, and that the world did this sometimes, and that it was not her fault, and not his fault, and not a verdict on their worth, and that there were ways of responding to it that preserved your dignity while still doing what needed to be done. He wanted to say all of that. Instead, he said, "Daddy just wants to see a little more before we do anything." "Okay." She studied him for a moment with those careful eyes that were so much like his own, it occasionally startled him. Then she nodded and went back to her drawing. At the reception desk, Yara Chen, 26 years old, 8 weeks into this job, having come from a customer service role at a hotel that had taught her, above all other things, that what people needed in the first 30 seconds of entering a space was to feel that someone in the room was glad they were there, had been watching. She had seen Marcus and Imani walk in. She had seen Derek not move. She had heard from across the floor with the ambient audio clarity of a quiet showroom, Terrell's careful deference and Derek's polished redirection. She was not yet in a position, professionally or personally, to do anything about what she had observed, and she knew this. But she had poured Imani a second water bottle without being asked, and she had noted, in the way that people noted things they were still deciding what to do with, that when Marcus had set his key bag on her counter earlier, the little metal tag on the ring had caught the light and showed a logo that she had looked at every morning on the wall behind the general manager's office. She had not said anything yet. She looked at the logo on the wall. She looked at the tag on the counter which Marcus had reclaimed when he picked up his bag. She turned back to her screen. The thing she was deciding was not yet decided, but it was getting there. Marcus, for his part, had settled into the waiting with the composure of someone who had made a private agreement with himself about how long he would observe before he escalated, and who was not yet at the end of that time. He had a particular memory that surfaced in moments like this one. Not a dramatic memory, not a formative trauma, just a thing his father had said to him once. When Marcus was 17 and had come home from a job interview that had gone wrong in a way he could not entirely articulate. His father, Reginald Calloway, who had spent 31 years as a machinist in a plant where he was the only person who looked like him in his department for the first 12 of those years, had sat across from him at the kitchen table and said, The way you respond when someone shows you who they are is data. Don't waste the data by reacting before you've finished collecting it. Marcus had been collecting data since 9:32. He was not finished yet. From the platform, the sound of the Hollisters laughing at something Derek had said drifted across the showroom, easy and warm, the particular sound of people being sold something they had already decided to buy. Imani turned her sketchbook around to show him the Jaguar, which now had spots and what appeared to be a small crown. "I added details," she said. "You did," Marcus said. "It's a royal Jaguar." "Makes sense," he said. And then, more quietly, in a register that was not quite talking to her and not quite thinking out loud, "Give me a little more time, baby." She put the crown back on the Jaguar and kept drawing. The second refusal. By 10:45, Derek Sloan had not circled back. The Hollisters had moved from the showroom floor to one of the glass-walled offices on the right side of the building. Marcus could see them through the transparent partition. Seated across from a finance manager, the preliminary paperwork already on the table. The morning's second wave of walk-in traffic had brought in a retired couple interested in the service department and a young woman who spent 20 minutes looking at a crossover before leaving with a brochure and an appointment card. Terrell had handled both of them quietly and competently in the way of someone who understood his lane and worked within it with genuine effort. Marcus had waited. He had spent the time usefully, had walked slowly and without apparent purpose along the perimeter of the showroom, examining vehicles with the unhurried attention of someone with nowhere pressing to be. He had read 3 window stickers in full. He had noted the service bulletin board near the corridor, which was slightly out of date. He had noted the coffee station, which was running low on the medium roast and had not been restocked. A small thing that was only a small thing unless you were tracking whether operational standards were being maintained in the gaps between what management was paying attention to. He had noted Yara Chen replenishing the water bottles near the reception desk and the way she moved through her station with the competence of someone who had made the physical space her own, even in 8 weeks. At 10:51, Marcus walked to the sales offices and stopped outside the door of the one with Derek Sloan's name on the placard. Derek was inside alone, reviewing something on his computer. Marcus knocked once on the open door frame. Derek looked up. The micro-adjustment in his expression, not dramatic, just a slight compression of the professional warmth that he deployed selectively, lasted less than a second. And then he was smiling. "Hey, I was going to come find you. You still have questions about the AX7? "I do," Marcus said. "Come on in." Derek gestured to the chair across the desk, and Marcus sat. There was a system to this moment, and Marcus recognized it because he had designed parts of it himself in the early years when he was building the operational playbook for the group. The office was a contained space. The desk created a natural authority gradient. The salesperson controlled the information flow, specs, financing options, availability, and the framing around all of it. A customer who walked into this office had already, in the choreography of the sales floor, been categorized. And the conversation that followed was shaped by that category in ways that were almost entirely invisible to the person sitting across the desk. Marcus had designed the office layout to create comfort, not leverage. He was aware, sitting in this one, that the intent and the practice had diverged. "So the flagship," Derek said, settling back slightly. "What's drawing you to it?" "I've been looking at the performance package," Marcus said. "I want to understand the difference between the standard and the performance trim, specifically the suspension tuning and the powertrain warranty terms." Derek nodded, reached for a brochure, flipped to a page. "So the performance trim it's a meaningful step up. Full package adds about $8,000 to the base price, which puts you all in with a few standard add-ons somewhere in the 66 to 68 range. He slid the brochure across, pointing to the figures. A lot of our clients find the standard trim actually hits most of their real-world needs at a more accessible number. Marcus did not look at where Derek was pointing. He looked at Derek. I understood the price point before I came in. I'm asking about the mechanical specifics. A pause. Brief, controlled, but present. Of course, Derek said. The performance suspension package gives you adaptive damping on all four corners' firmer spring rates. It's noticeable on track applications, less so in standard commuting. The powertrain warranty on the performance trim is the same as standard, 5 years, 60,000 miles, whichever comes first. He paused again. Can I ask what you're currently driving? Sometimes that helps me understand what kind of upgrade you're looking for. A Grand Cherokee, Marcus said. 7 years old. Something passed through Derek's expression. Not contempt, because Derek was too professional for contempt, and because it was not really contempt, but rather a form of confirmation. The data point had registered. That's a reliable vehicle, Derek said, in the tone of a man being generous. You'd definitely feel the difference in the driving experience. I do want to be upfront with you, and this is something I say to everyone at the 66,000 mark. A lot of people prefer to explore financing options that really stretch over a comfortable term, so the monthly number doesn't become a strain. We have some great programs, but I also want to make sure we're starting in the right conversation, because we wouldn't want to get you excited about a vehicle that isn't the right fit for your situation. Marcus was quiet for 3 full seconds. Not a tense silence, a deliberate one, the kind that someone chose to give a statement the space it deserved. I'd like to speak with the general manager, he said, a flicker of something behind Derek's eyes. Professionals had various ways of registering what they privately termed a difficult customer. Not always consciously, not always fairly. And Marcus could see this one land. Of course, Derek said with the unruffled patience of someone who had handled this request before and had never found it particularly meaningful. Let me get Gail. Gail Morris had been the general manager of the Dunwoody location for 18 months. She had come from the Alpharetta branch, where she had managed operations with a rigor that Marcus had found genuinely impressive during her performance reviews. She was organized, data-oriented, and had reduced the service department's turnaround time by 11% in her first year at Dunwoody. What she had not yet done, and this was a gap that Marcus had not fully appreciated until this morning, was address the sales floor culture that had been running at this location since before she arrived. The culture that had its DNA in a man named Carl Wexford and its present-day expression in a man named Derek Sloan, and that had not yet been legible to her because it was not the kind of thing that showed up in the metrics she was tracking. She came to the doorway of the office and Marcus stood. Gail Morris was a composed woman in her mid-40s who moved with the focused energy of someone who had 4 things on her mental to-do list at any given moment. She shook Marcus's hand. Good morning, I'm Gail Morris. How can I help? Marcus explained briefly, and without dramatic embellishment, he had come in to ask about the flagship line had been redirected twice toward lower-priced options without being asked about his budget or his needs, and wanted to understand whether that was standard practice or a misunderstanding. Gail listened. Her expression was professional, attentive, balanced, not dismissive. She looked at Derek, who was standing at the edge of the office. Derek? Derek's response was measured, reasonable, and almost entirely a reframing of what had happened. He described the conversation as standard customer consultation, establishing fit, discussing realistic expectations, ensuring clients felt informed rather than surprised by price points. He said the phrase, "I say that to everyone," a second time, which was the phrase that people used when they wanted to indicate that nothing personal had occurred, whether or not anything personal had occurred. Gail turned back to Marcus. I understand the frustration, she said, and Marcus could tell that she was trying, that she was, in fact, one of the people on this floor for whom the words were not empty. I'd be happy to have Derek go through the full AX7 lineup with you. No assumptions about where you land. That's what we should have started with. I appreciate that, Marcus said. I also want to be clear that I'm not the first person this has happened to here. A slight shift in the room. Gail's expression was still balanced, but behind it, something recalibrated. What do you mean? I mean that this pattern shows up in your feedback channels, not once, a number of times. He said it with the evenness of someone reporting weather conditions, not weaponizing the information, yet simply placing it on the table. Gail looked at Derek. Derek looked for the first time this morning like someone who was not entirely in control of the frame of the conversation. Our feedback scores have been strong, he said. I review them monthly. Some of them, Marcus said. He let that land, then added, I don't need to continue this right now. I'm going to sit with my daughter for a while. If you want to restart the conversation about the AX7, I'm available. He nodded to Gail, a gesture that carried more natural authority than any of the words he'd spoken, and walked back toward the showroom floor. Gail watched him go. Derek said, He's probably going to leave a review. Gail did not respond to that. In the seating area, Amani had finished the Jaguar and moved on to something that appeared to be a building. Marcus sat down, and she immediately showed him the building, which had a flag on top. It's the headquarters, she informed him. Headquarters of what? She shrugged. Something important. He reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. He did not open it yet. On the keychain, resting on the arm of the chair, he had taken his keys out of his pocket at some point in the wait. A habit he had when he was thinking. The Callaway Group logo caught the light and sent a small, bright point of reflection across the glass table surface. At the reception desk, Yara Chen watched this without appearing to watch it. She had been doing something with her hands that she could not have fully described. Organizing brochures, answering a phone call that lasted 40 seconds, while a part of her attention had tracked Marcus and Amani from the moment they had come back to the seating area, and Derek's expression when Marcus had walked away from the office, and the way Gail Morris had turned toward her computer with a quality of focus that felt slightly more purposeful than before. She looked at the keychain. She looked at the wall. She thought about the logo on the wall, which she had studied carefully in her first week, because she was the kind of person who learned a new place by reading all of its surfaces. The Callaway Group logo, a stylized C inside a geometric frame, rendered in the brand's charcoal and gold palette, had been designed, she had learned, from the employee onboarding packet by the company's founder, who had sketched the original version on a paper napkin at a restaurant in Decatur because he had been waiting for a meeting and didn't have anything else to write on. She reached for the small metal tag on the counter, Marcus's keychain, which he had left there again when Amani had needed another water bottle, and picked it up, turned it over, set it back down. The logo was the same. She thought about this for a moment with the clarity of someone who had just understood something and was now deciding what to do with the understanding. It was, she thought, a small thing. It was also not a small thing at all. She picked up the water bottle for Amani and walked out from behind the desk. The keychain. Yara Chen was not someone who acted impulsively. She had grown up in a household where her mother, a surgical nurse, had modeled the practice of waiting until you were certain before you moved. Not waiting out of fear, but waiting out of respect for the weight of action. It was a distinction her mother had made explicitly and often, and Yara had absorbed it the way children absorb the things that were spoken with quiet conviction over many years. She was certain. She crossed the showroom floor toward the customer seating area with Amani's water bottle in her hand and the kind of gait that was unhurried enough to look purposeful rather than urgent, because she had also learned from the hotel that how you moved through a lobby told people things you hadn't decided to tell them yet. She arrived at the seating area, set the water bottle on the coffee table in front of Amani, and said, "Here you go, sweetheart." Amani looked up from her sketchbook. "Thank you," she said, and then, with the directness of a 9-year-old who had been raised to be polite, but not performatively so, "You're the only one who's been nice to us today." Yara looked at Amani for a moment. Then she looked at Marcus. Marcus was watching her with the kind of attention that she now recognized for what it was. Not idle, not passive, not the attention of someone with nothing better to do. The attention of someone who had been gathering information all morning with the patience of a person who already knew the answer and was giving the room the chance to confirm it on its own terms. She reached into the pocket of her blazer. She had taken the keychain from the counter before leaving her station, not because she was certain she would do anything with it, but because she had not wanted to make this decision from a distance. She placed it on the coffee table between them, next to the water bottle, and said quietly, "Sir, is this?" She touched the logo on the tag with one finger, then gestured with that same finger toward the wall where the Callaway Group branding was mounted, the charcoal and gold letters above the employee recognition board. Marcus looked at the keychain, then at her, then at the wall, then back at her. The room was not silent. There was the low ambient sound of the showroom, a phone ringing at the service desk, the muffled conversation of the Hollisters from behind their office glass. But in the immediate 3 feet of space between Marcus and Yara, something very quiet had occurred. He held her gaze for 2 seconds. Then he nodded once, slowly, with the deliberateness of a door being opened. Yara let out a breath she had not quite known she was holding. "I thought so," she said. I wasn't sure if I should." "You did the right thing," Marcus said. His voice was low, with no particular urgency in it, the kind of calm that was not the absence of feeling, but the management of it. "Can you do something for me?" "Yes," Yara said. "Don't say anything to anyone yet." He picked up the keychain and turned it in his fingers, once the logo catching the overhead light. "I need about 5 minutes." He paused then. "And whatever happens in the next hour, you're not involved in any of it in a way that puts your job at risk. I want to be clear about that." Yara nodded. She looked at him for one more second with the expression of someone who had just done something she had not been entirely sure she was going to do, and found that she did not regret it, then turned and walked back toward the reception desk with the same unhurried pace she had come with. Marcus looked down at the keychain in his palm. The small C inside its frame, the birthday gift from a 9-year-old who had found it in a supply closet and decided it was the perfect present because it already had his name on it. "Daddy," Amani said, watching him with the focused curiosity she applied to things she was not sure she understood yet. "Who was that?" "Someone with good instincts," Marcus said. He stood up. He took his phone from his jacket pocket and found the contact he needed without scrolling. Raymond Osei, Chief Financial Officer of Callaway Prestige Auto Group. 7 years in that role. The only person in the company besides Marcus's attorney who had full visibility into the ownership and financial structure of all 4 locations. Raymond picked up on the second ring. "Marcus." Raymond's voice had the mild surprise of someone who knew that a Saturday morning call from his boss meant something had shifted from routine to notable. "I wasn't expecting." "I'm at Dunwoody," Marcus said. A pause. "Are you doing a site visit?" "Something like that." Marcus was walking as he spoke, moving from the seating area toward the center of the showroom floor, not hurrying, his voice pitched at a volume that was audible to the immediate vicinity without being projected. "I need you to pull up the personnel files for Derek Sloan and Gail Morris. Current performance documentation, any previous conduct notes, and the Q2 customer feedback reports I forwarded to you last month." "I have the feedback reports," Raymond said. "I can pull the files in about 3 minutes." "Take your time," Marcus said. "And Raymond, stay on the line. I may need you to confirm some things verbally in a few minutes." "Copy," Raymond said. Marcus lowered the phone slightly but did not end the call, and he stood in the center of the showroom floor and looked at the room the way he had been looking at it all morning. Except that now, he was not looking as a man without a visible claim to the space. He was looking as what he was. Derek Sloan came out of his office at that moment. The timing was unremarkable, a natural intersection of movement in a space they were both occupying, and crossed the showroom floor toward the service desk with his eyes on his tablet. He had passed 3 feet from Marcus when something registered and he stopped. It might have been the quality of Marcus's stillness. It might have been the phone held loosely in one hand with the unmistakable posture of an active call. It might have been the fact that Marcus was standing in the dead center of the floor with no browsing purpose that Derek could identify, looking at the room rather than at any vehicle in it. Whatever it was, Derek stopped walking and looked at Marcus with an expression that had not yet resolved itself into anything specific. Not recognition, because he still didn't know, but a premonitory unease. The feeling of someone who has been in enough high-stakes rooms to recognize when the room has changed its charge without knowing yet what caused the change. Marcus looked at him. "Is everything all right?" Derek said. The words were professional. The tone was the tone of someone walking carefully. "It will be," Marcus said. Derek stood there for one more second. Then he continued toward the service desk, but his pace was different now, slightly too deliberate. The walk of someone who did not want to appear to be hurrying. From the reception desk, Yara was looking at neither of them. She was looking at her screen with the focused attention of someone who had decided, having done what they came to do, to wait. Imani had left the seating area and come to stand near her father. She looked up at him, then at the floor, then at the cars on the platform. "Are you going to tell someone?" she asked. Marcus looked down at her. Something in his expression shifted. Not softened exactly, but changed its register, the way a room changes when a window is opened and outside air comes through. He crouched down to her level, which put the two of them at the same height in the middle of the showroom floor. And she looked at him with those eyes that had been paying attention to everything all morning and missing nothing. "Yeah," he said. "I think it's time." Imani glanced at the phone in his hand at Raymond's name on the screen, and then back at her father. "Is that guy in trouble?" Marcus thought about the honest answer, which was that Derek Sloan was not in trouble the way villains in movies were in trouble. That the truth was more complicated and less satisfying than that, and also, ultimately, more just. "He's going to have to look at some things," Marcus said, "that he probably hasn't wanted to look at." Imani considered this. "Is that bad?" "I think it's necessary," Marcus said. She nodded with the gravity of someone processing a new category of information. Then, "Can we still get real food after?" "Yes," Marcus said. "With cheese." "With cheese." She reached over and took his hand, and he straightened up, and the two of them stood in the middle of the Callaway Prestige Auto Group Dunwoody showroom floor. The man whose name was on the deed, and his daughter who had given him the keychain that had started all of this. While the afternoon light came through the glass facade and the room continued around them, not yet knowing what it was about to become. From the speaker on Raymond's end, a document being pulled. The quiet sound of a machine producing evidence. Marcus raised the phone back to his ear. "Raymond," he said, "I need you to schedule an emergency management call for Monday morning, all 4 locations, and have the legal team standing by." "Done," Raymond said. "Do you want me to explain what this is about when I send the calendar invite?" Marcus looked at the showroom at the midnight blue car on the platform at the Hollisters, behind their office glass at Terrell near the service corridor, who had been the only person on this floor to try to help them without needing to be asked. At Yara at the reception desk, not looking at anything in particular. At Derek Sloan near the service desk, trying to look like a man with nothing on his mind. "Tell them," Marcus said, "that it's about culture and standards and what we owe the people who walk through our doors." He ended the call, put the phone in his pocket, felt Imani's hand in his. The afternoon was not over. The hardest part of it, in fact, had not yet begun. What the dealership became after that Saturday. The conference room at the back of the Dunwoody location had been designed as a space for team meetings and presentations. A long table, 8 chairs, a wall-mounted screen, a window that looked out onto the service bay rather than the showroom floor, which was a design choice that Marcus had approved 4 years ago because he had believed, and still believed, that the people who fixed the cars deserved as much presence in the building's visual geography as the people who sold them. The blinds were half open now, and the late afternoon light came through them in horizontal bars across the table. And the table was very clean, and the room was very quiet, and Marcus was seated at one end of it. Derek Sloan sat across from him. Gail Morris was to Derek's right. The branch's HR liaison, a woman named Patricia, had driven in from the regional office at Marcus's request and sat at the far end of the table with a yellow legal pad in front of her that she was not yet writing on. Amani was in the children's waiting area near the service desk in the custody of Terrell, who had been asked if he would mind watching her for an hour, and had said with genuine willingness that he did not mind at all. Marcus had introduced himself at the start of the meeting, not with a speech, not with drama. He had walked in and said, "My name is Marcus Calloway. I own this company. I've been in the building since 9:30 this morning, and I'd like to talk about what I saw." He had said it the way someone might say that the quarterly numbers were ready, or that the catering had arrived, as information positioned for use. The silence that had followed was the kind that had texture. Derek Sloan's expression in the seconds after that introduction had moved through several distinct states. Disbelief, then a rapid backward recalculation of the morning's events, then something that was not quite fear but was adjacent to it. The particular quality of exposure that people felt when a story they had told themselves about their own professionalism was suddenly readable from the outside in a way that contradicted the telling. He had recovered quickly. He was experienced at recovering. "Mr. Calloway," Derek said, and his voice was steady with only a slight metallic quality that had not been there in his showroom voice. "I want to say that nothing that happened today was intended to... I'm going to stop you," Marcus said, "because intent is going to be useful to discuss, but not as the first thing." He opened the folder in front of him, printed that morning by Raymond, driven over by a courier an hour ago, and laid 3 pages on the table, not dramatically, like setting down mail. "These are the customer feedback reports from the past 2 quarters at this location. 6 reviews cite experiences consistent with what I observed today. You'll notice they cluster around your Saturday schedule." Derek looked at the papers. He did not pick them up. "Customer feedback is..." "Derek?" Gail Morris said his name quietly. Not a rebuke, a signal. He stopped. Marcus continued, "I'm not here to end your career. I want to be clear about that. What I want to understand is whether what you did today, the way you read my daughter and me before we said a word, the way you redirected me to lower price points without asking a single question about what I was actually looking for, whether you know that you do it." Derek was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice had a different quality. The professional armor still there, but slightly loosened, as if he had made a small and painful decision. "It's called reading the room," he said. "I've been doing this for 19 years. You learn to..." "You learn to what?" Marcus said, not unkindly, with the interest of someone who actually wanted the answer. Another pause, longer this time. "To prioritize," Derek said. And then, after a further silence that seemed to cost him something, "I was wrong about you." "You were wrong about 6 other people too," Marcus said. "That we know of." He looked at Derek steadily. "What I need to know, and Patricia is here because this conversation is going on record, is whether this is something you did because you believed it was best for the business, or something you did because a system told you to, and no one ever pushed back." Derek looked at the table. Something in his jaw tightened, then released. It was the look of someone who had been very good at a thing for a very long time, and was being asked to examine for the first time in 19 years whether the thing they were good at was actually good. It was not a comfortable look. Marcus let him sit in it. "Both," Derek said finally. "I think both." Marcus nodded. He did not say anything for a moment. Then, he said, "We have something to fix." He looked at Gail. "Starting with how this location's training has worked and what we're going to change." He looked at Patricia. "There will be a formal process. The specifics will come from HR and legal, and I'll be involved directly." He looked back at Derek. "Your status will be on hold pending that review. I will not make a unilateral decision about your future at this company, in this room, today." Derek absorbed this. He had perhaps been expecting something faster and more absolute. The slower, more procedural reality of it seemed, if anything, more unsettling than a swift verdict would have been. "Understood," he said. "One more thing," Marcus said. He closed the folder. "What you called reading the room, you learned it somewhere. I want to know who taught you." Derek told him about Carl Wexford. Took 5 minutes. Gave more detail than he probably intended to, in the way that people gave more detail than they intended when they had been holding something tightly for a long time, and someone had finally, firmly, asked them to put it down. Marcus listened to all of it. When Derek finished, Marcus said, "Thank you." Then, "You can go." Gail stayed behind after Derek and Patricia left, and she and Marcus talked for 22 minutes. It was a harder conversation in some ways than the one with Derek because Gail was a person of genuine competence and genuine good intention. And the thing Marcus needed to tell her, that competence and good intention were not sufficient in the absence of active attention to the spaces you had not yet looked, was a harder thing to hear when you had not intended to look away. Gail took it with the directness of someone who had not gotten to her position by flinching at accurate information. She asked 2 questions and made one request, that she be allowed to be part of designing the corrective process, rather than simply receiving it. Marcus told her that was exactly what he expected. On the way out of the conference room, Marcus stopped in the hallway. He almost continued walking. Then he turned and went toward the service bay corridor, where a young man was standing just outside the door to the break room with a paper cup of coffee and the expression of someone who has been having a very unusual Saturday. The young man saw Marcus and his entire posture shifted. The reflexive adjustment of an employee who has spent a day in proximity to something consequential and is not sure yet whether any of it is aimed at him. Marcus stopped in front of him. He was, Marcus estimated, no more than 24. His badge read Tyler. "Tyler?" Marcus said. "Yes, sir," Tyler said, and the coffee cup trembled very slightly. "How long have you been at this location?" 4 months, sir." Marcus looked at him. Tyler had the look of someone who had been doing his job carefully and watching the people around him and learning from everything he watched, and who had not yet found a framework for what he was observing that told him whether to emulate it or resist it. It was a look Marcus recognized. It was the look of someone at a crossroads they hadn't yet named. 4 months is long enough to notice things, Marcus said. Tyler was quiet for a second, then carefully, "Yes, sir." "Good," Marcus said. "Notice them. And when the new training program rolls out next month, it will be more relevant to you than you know right now." He paused. "You still have a future here if you want it." Tyler let out a breath. Small, almost inaudible, but present. Marcus nodded and kept walking. Amani was in the waiting area with Terrell, who had produced from somewhere a coloring book that was technically intended for children waiting for their parents' cars to be serviced, and which Amani had received with the enthusiasm of someone who did not judge a canvas by its purpose. She had filled 4 pages. She looked up when Marcus came around the corner and stood up immediately, tucking the coloring book under her arm with the efficiency of a person whose hands always needed to be doing something. Marcus sat down in the chair beside her. Terrell caught his eye and gave a small, respectful nod before stepping discreetly away to give them space, which Marcus noted and appreciated. "Are you done?" Amani asked. "For today," Marcus said. She studied his face with the focused assessment of a 9-year-old who had learned to read her father's expressions as a primary source of information about the world. Did you fix it? Oh. He thought about Derek in the conference room and the weight that had moved across the man's face when he said both, and the way Gail Morris had leaned forward and asked to be part of the solution. He thought about Tyler in the hallway, and about Yara at the reception desk, and about the 6 reviews he had read twice and the families they represented, and all the Saturday mornings he would never know about. He thought about the fact that nothing that had happened today had finished happening yet, that the real work of it was going to begin on Monday and was going to take months, and was going to require his attention in ways that his calendar had not yet made room for. Not all the way, he said, but we started. Amani considered this. Then, is the lady who gave me water going to be okay? Marcus looked toward the reception desk, where Yara was back at her station, typing something. Her posture, the even, composed posture it had been all morning. I think, he said, she might be better than okay. Amani seemed to decide that this was an acceptable answer. She held up the coloring book page she had finished, a tiger rendered in purple and orange, with a considerable number of additional spots that tigers did not technically have, and said, Terrell let me keep this one. Good man, Marcus said. He was nice to us, Amani said, from the beginning. I know, Marcus said. I saw. Amani put the tiger page into her bag, zipped it up, and stood with the bag on both shoulders. Now can we get food? Now we can get food. Real food, she specified. Real food, he confirmed. She reached up and took his hand, and he stood, and for a moment, he just stood there, in his gray t-shirt and his old New Balance sneakers and his father's watch, in a building whose deed had his name on it, holding his daughter's hand, listening to the ambient sounds of a place he had built that had not yet become everything he had intended it to be, but that was going to. Daddy, Amani said, pulling gently toward the door. Yeah, he said. I'm coming. They walked out through the showroom floor. The automatic doors opened. The afternoon heat of Atlanta met them like a held breath finally released. They crossed the lot to the Jeep, and Marcus unlocked the doors, and Amani climbed into the back seat and immediately retrieved her sketchbook from the seat pocket, and the crayons in the cup holder rattled as Marcus settled into the driver's seat and the engine turned over. He sat there for a moment before pulling out. The Callaway Group keychain hung from the ignition, the little C in its geometric frame turning very slightly in the air conditioning. His daughter's gift. He looked at it for one quiet second, and then he pulled out of the lot and into the afternoon, and he didn't look back. 3 months later, on a Tuesday in October, a family came into the Callaway Prestige Auto Group Dunwoody location during the lunch hour. The Rodriguez family. Edgar, his wife Constanza, and their 2 sons, aged 7 and 11, had been saving for 14 months, and Edgar had called ahead because he had not been certain, and the voice on the phone had been kind, and so they had come. Yara Chen met them at the door. She was wearing the same Callaway Group blazer she had worn on that July Saturday, but she had a different badge now, one that read Training and Development Specialist. And she had chosen the front of house shift that day because she still believed, as she had believed before she knew why it mattered, that what people needed in the first 30 seconds of walking into a space was to feel that someone was glad they were there. She showed them to the chairs. She asked both boys if they wanted water. She pulled up the AX7 information on the showroom tablet because Edgar had mentioned it on the phone. She did not ask about his budget because the new intake protocol, the one she had helped write in the 3 weeks of internal working sessions she had participated in, alongside the new sales training curriculum, said that budget was something a customer offered when they were ready, and that a salesperson's job at the point of contact was to listen, not to filter. Edgar Rodriguez sat down, and the 2 boys immediately pressed their faces against the glass of the platform car and Constanza smiled for the first time since they had arrived. And the showroom was the right temperature, and the light was good, and the coffee station was fully stocked. Derek Sloan was no longer at the Dunwoody location. He had left the company after the formal review process had concluded, not fired, but offered a mutual separation that came with a structured package and a letter that said, in the language that HR letters used for things that were true but had to be said carefully, that his management approach had not aligned with the company's evolving standards. He had signed without contesting it, which Marcus had been told by Patricia, and which he had received as a complicated piece of information, not a victory, because it had never been about victory, but as an ending that was more honest than the beginning. Tyler had moved into a sales associate role and was, according to Gail Morris's most recent report, performing in the top third of the floor. In the conference room that Marcus had sat in 3 months ago, there was a new framing on the wall above the presentation screen. 4 words in the same charcoal and gold of the Callaway Group palette. Every customer is someone. Marcus had not put it there. Gail had. He had found out when she sent a photo to his phone with no caption, and he had looked at it for a long moment, and then replied with a single word. Good. On a Friday in November, a Bring Your Child to Work Day that Marcus had instituted, partly because it was a policy he believed in, and partly because he had wanted Imani to see, at least once, the inside of the thing that had taken so much of his time and attention for so many years. Imani stood in the hallway outside the executive conference room at the main Buckhead office, looking at the framing on the door that said, Callaway Prestige Auto Group, Marcus Callaway, founder and CEO, the letters just at her eye level. She looked at it for a long time with the serious, absorptive attention she gave to things she was trying to understand fully before she formed a conclusion. Then she looked up at Marcus. Did you always know, she said, that you'd own all of this? Marcus looked at the letters on the door. He thought about the paper napkin indicator, about his father at the kitchen table, about a 7-year-old Jeep in a parking lot, about a keychain given by a child who had not known its weight. No, he said, but I always knew I'd earn it. Imani looked at the door for one more second. Then she reached up and took his hand the way she always did, and they walked down the hallway together. And the light was good, and the building was theirs, and the work, the real work, the kind that outlasted any single morning, was still going on. Dignity does not ask for permission. But sometimes, when it is used with intention, it can turn a single act of injustice into the reason 100 other people are treated as they should have been all along. If this story stayed with you, share it. And if you've ever stood in a room where someone tried to make you feel small, know that the room never got to decide what you were worth.